Instructor Sabal had seen a lot in his years, teaching at the Intergalactic Academy for Unified Species. He'd guided students from the lava-choked moons of Exibor, the oceanic spheres of Kalmaris, and even the elusive cloudwalkers from the gas giant Sorithol. His classroom room 14s of the Academy's Central Learning Tower was often praised as a model of cultural harmony. The students came from dozens of different worlds, and though misunderstandings arose now and then, they usually worked themselves out with a bit of patience, a lesson on empathy, and maybe a shared snack during the mid-cycle break. But everything changed the day the human girl arrived. Her name was Julie. Just Julie, no multi-syllabic title or clan name common to many other species. Her records listed her as coming from Earth, a planet Sable had only vaguely heard about in passing during his own training rotations. He remembered something about Earth being categorized as a Class 5 hazard world, but he hadn't looked deeper. That classification didn't necessarily mean it was uninhabitable, just difficult. Still, when the board told him a human student would be joining his class, he was intrigued. Nervous, yes, but intrigued. Julie showed up a week later, escorted by a diplomatic liaison and an automated medical unit. She was small compared to most of the other students, thin-limbed, pink-skinned, with dark brown hair that curled naturally over her shoulders. She didn't have scales or fur or feathers, no exoskeleton, no retractable mandibles, no built-in translators. Just a plain face with two wide, expressive eyes and a nervous half-smile. Sabal made the introductions carefully. "This," he said, gesturing with an open palm, "is Julie. She comes from a planet called Earth, located in the Orion Spur. She is the first human to attend our school." The room went quiet, too quiet. Dojiat, a seal-like creature from the icy-ringed moon of Telric, blinked twice. Garrix, the four-eyed lizardling from Sector 9, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Even the usually talkative twins from Aetana 3, who'd once spent 20 minutes arguing over the correct way to pronounce hydrogen, remained speechless. Julie offered a timid wave. "Hey." A few students murmured back uncertain greetings, but most just stared. The silence clung to the air long after she took her assigned seat in the back corner of the room. At first, Sable thought it was just the typical new student jitters. First days were awkward for anyone, especially at a school where half your classmates didn't breathe oxygen or had tentacles instead of hands. But as the days turned into weeks, he realized something was off, very off. Julie was always alone. She ate her lunch in a secluded corner of the common area, where the light flickered slightly and the ambient temperature was uncomfortably low for most species. She never joined group games during recess or spoke up during discussions, unless called on directly. Sable watched her genuinely try to make friends. She smiled at classmates, offered to help during lab sessions, even brought in small handmade trinkets from her planet's customs to share. No one accepted. Some avoided eye contact entirely. Others flinched when she got too close. One student, when asked to partner with her for a two-person assignment, politely requested to work alone, instead citing planetary incompatibility as the reason. That one hurt to watch. Sabal couldn't ignore it any longer. Something about Julie unnerved the others. He began asking subtle questions in private tutoring sessions. "What do you know about humans?" he asked Garrix during a review of planetary atmospheres. "They're from a Deathworld," the boy lizard replied immediately, lowering his voice. "Everyone knows that. A Deathworld," Sable echoed. Garrix nodded solemnly. "A planet where everything is trying to kill you: climate, animals, the planet itself. My cousin said humans evolved through constant struggle, like predators, but smarter." Some say their species wiped out hundreds of others just to claim more space. Sable kept his face neutral, but inside, his heart sank. He asked around quietly and realized this belief was nearly universal. The term Deathworlder wasn't just a classification, it was a legend. In hushed tones, students passed around exaggerated stories about Earth, acid oceans, carnivorous forests, airborne viruses that melted skin. The humans themselves, ruthless survivors who could kill with their bare hands and never felt fear. Julie, of course, didn't know any of this. She just saw the way people stiffened around her, the way conversations died when she entered the room. She saw the empty chairs around her during lunch, the group projects where she was left off the list. And Sable saw what that did to her. She stopped smiling after the second week. Her posture slouched. Her answers became shorter, more hesitant. He once found her sitting outside on the hydro balcony after class, staring out at the artificial horizon with her food tray untouched beside her. Sable sat down next to her. "Julie, is everything okay?" She shrugged. "Yeah. Just homesick, I guess." "You don't talk to the other students much," he said gently. "I try," she said, and the way her voice cracked nearly broke his heart. "But I don't think they want me here." He wanted to tell her that wasn't true, that it was all a misunderstanding, that things would get better, but he also believed in honesty. So instead he asked, "Do you know what a death world is?" She frowned, looking puzzled. "Sort of. My uncle mentioned that once. Said it's what the Galactic Council calls planets like Earth, because of the gravity in the atmosphere and stuff." "Stuff," Sable repeated. "Yes, that's one way to put it." She looked away. "Is that why they're scared of me?" He didn't answer, not directly. He didn't have to. That night, Sable sat in his private office, long after the last artificial sun dipped below the simulated horizon. He scrolled through reports on Earth, real scientific data, not the fear-mongering tales passed around by frightened teenagers. Yes, Earth was dangerous by galactic standards. Variable climates, tectonic activity, apex predators. But it was also resilient, beautiful, and teeming with life. And humans were more than survivors. They were creators, explorers, dreamers, streamers. He had to fix this. He couldn't let ignorance isolate someone who had come all this way just to learn. The next morning, he stood in front of the class with purpose in his voice. "In 3 weeks," he said, "each of you will deliver a video presentation about your homeworld. The focus will be on dangers both natural and biological. I want you to show what makes your planet hazardous. Show us the cliffs, the creatures, the catastrophes." A murmur went through the class. "This will count for 40% of your final grade," he added, which instantly sharpened their attention. You may work in pairs if your partner is from the same planet. But for those of you with unique origins, he looked directly at Julie. "You'll be flying solo." He hoped they understood his point. Every world has danger. Every world could be considered uninhabitable under the right lens. But behind the shadows, there was always beauty, always something to learn. And maybe, just maybe, if the others saw what Earth was truly like, they'd stop fearing Julie and start seeing her for what she really was. Not a monster. Not a threat. Just another kid trying to belong. Instructor Sabal prided himself on reading the room. It was a skill every veteran teacher developed over time, noticing the subtle cues in body language, the silences between spoken words, the glances exchanged when someone said something out of place. And lately, the mood in room 14 had shifted in a way he couldn't ignore. It wasn't just tension. It was fear low, constant, and centered on one person. Julie. She didn't show it on the surface. In fact, Julie had developed a calm, even polite exterior that she wore like a protective shield. But Sabal saw the signs. She never raised her hand unless directly asked. She avoided eye contact. Her jokes, when she made them, landed flat in the silence that followed. Worse, she had started packing her lunch into a reusable foil pouch and eating it outside, alone on the observation deck, even though the temperature wasn't ideal for her species. At first, Sabal tried small things, rearranging the seating chart to place her next to more outgoing students, assigning her to group projects that might lead to conversation. Nothing worked. The other students remained distant, not hostile, just uneasy. He knew exactly why. The rumors about Earth had spread fast. Deathworld, monster planet, human beings as apex predators. Every species had its myths, and when those myths fed into ancient fears, they spread like wildfire. It didn't help that most of the students had never seen a human in person before. Julie, in their eyes, was the physical embodiment of a terrifying legend, one with opposable thumbs and no exoskeleton. Sabal sat late into the night at his desk, going over Earth's dossier on the Academy database. The files weren't classified, just rarely accessed. Earth's official designation was Class 5 inhabitable, high risk. That didn't surprise him. The gravity alone would disqualify most sentient species from surviving more than a few minutes on the surface. And the biodiversity over 8 million species, many of them venomous, predatory, or both, was staggering. But he also saw the contradictions. Humanity had built cities in the sky, harnessed nuclear energy, sent probes to the far reaches of space. They had cured diseases, mapped their own genetic code, created works of art and philosophy that rivaled anything produced by the longest-lived civilizations in the galaxy. How could a species so dangerous be so creative? He didn't have an answer, but he knew fear came from ignorance, and he was a teacher. His job was to replace fear with understanding. The next morning, he walked into class with renewed purpose. The students were already at their desks, buzzing quietly over the latest interschool sporting drama. The twins from Aether 3 were arguing again, this time about whether throwing a plasma disc counted as intentional deflection under the Academy's rules. Julie, as always, sat quietly in the back row, her datapad open but untouched. Sabal stepped to the front of the room, his voice cutting through the chatter. New assignment. That got their attention. Instantly, all eyes turned to him. Assignments were a big deal, especially when they were announced outside the regular schedule. For your final evaluation this term, he said, each of you will prepare a video presentation. A few groans. A couple of murmured again from the back. He continued unfazed. The topic, your homeworld. More specifically, the dangers of your homeworld: natural disasters, predatory species, unstable geology, anything that makes your planet risky to live on. Now the room was quiet. I want you to show us what makes your world inhospitable, what a visitor should fear. I want real footage if possible, images, recordings, even personal stories. Be honest, be detailed. This is worth 40% of your final grade. Murmurs again, this time with more energy. It was a strange prompt, unusual, even, but intriguing. You may collaborate, Sabal added, but only with someone from your own world. If you're the only student from your planet, he glanced at Julie, you'll work solo. Julie didn't react outwardly, but Sabal noticed the way she blinked twice, slowly, before nodding. One student raised a tentacle. Instructor, what if our homeworld has no real danger? It's pretty peaceful. Then show us that, Sabal replied. But be honest, Every world has something dangerous. And if it doesn't, well, maybe you'll learn something new by trying to find it. Another student chimed in, this time from the front row. What's the point of this? I mean, it's not like we're going on vacation to each other's planets. Sabal gave a small, knowing smile. Perspective, understanding. We fear what we don't know. The more we know, the less room there is for fear. You might find out your homeworld isn't the only one with scary things. Or that danger looks different depending on where you stand. No one said anything after that. After class, Sable stayed behind to reorganize some files. Julie lingered near the door, clutching her datapad. "Instructor?" she asked. "Yes, Julie." Her voice was quiet, cautious. "Is this because of me?" He paused. He had expected her to ask, but not this soon. "It's because of all of you," he said gently. "You're not the only one misunderstood, Julie. But yes, this is partly a way to help everyone see each other more clearly." She nodded. "Okay, I just didn't want to make things worse." "You're not," he said. "I think you'll find this assignment gives you more power than you think." Over the next few days, the class transformed. Where there had once been silence or avoidance, now there was curiosity. Students began asking each other questions not out of politeness, but with genuine interest. What kind of predators lived in the sulfuric swamps of Kresh? Did the moons of Arkad really shake apart every 6 years? Could the gravity storms on Mevron tear metal from orbit? Sable watched it all with quiet satisfaction. Julie, too, had changed. She no longer sat passively at her desk, but actively worked on her video with a fierce kind of focus. She spent hours in the library archive, pulling wildlife footage, geological data, and climate reports. Once, Sabal passed her study booth and saw a still image of a massive wave cresting over a coastal city. Her caption read, "Tsunami. No warning, no mercy." There was something sobering about the way she worked. She wasn't bragging. She wasn't exaggerating. She was documenting. And maybe, Sabal thought, she was doing more than just turning in a project. Maybe she was finally telling her side of the story. A week before the presentations were due, Sable called a staff meeting to share his progress with the other instructors. Most were supportive, if skeptical. "You're making kids showcase trauma?" one asked. "A little intense, don't you think?" Sabal shrugged. "They're not showing trauma. They're showing reality. And some of them have never had to think about their world from someone else's perspective before. It's good for them." Another teacher leaned back in her chair. "I heard the human girl's presentation might be disturbing." "Probably," Sabal replied. "But so is being a teenage girl on a planet where everything, including the weather, might kill you." That shut them up. On the day of the presentations, the air in room 14 was electric. Students came in buzzing with nerves and excitement, clutching data pads and projection cubes. The lights dimmed, and one by one, the presentations began. The first featured small creatures with retractable claws. The second showed birds with strong beaks and dive-bombing habits. The class reacted with gasps and applause. Julie watched them all, quiet and unreadable. Her turn would come. And when it did, Sabal knew the room would never see her the same way again. The day of the presentations arrived faster than anyone expected. Even Julie, who had spent the past 3 weeks immersed in files, editing clips, recording narration, found herself glancing at the clock more often than usual. Her heart wasn't racing. Exactly, it was slower, heavier, like a weight pressing down on her chest, steady and inescapable. She was third on the schedule. Not first, which would have been a relief, get it over with, say what needed to be said, sit back and survive the aftermath. But not last either, where the silence after her video would feel like a closing door. No, she was stuck in the middle. Enough time to observe the others, not enough time to escape. She sat near the back of the room, hands folded around her datapad, eyes fixed on the screen. Instructor Sabal stood at the front, calm and expectant as always. "Let's begin," he said. "Team Barry, you're up." 3 students stood, all from the same planet Barry, a forested, temperate world with mild seasons and a reputation for being safe, peaceful. Julie had heard that before. She also remembered one of the students flinching when she'd brushed past him in the hallway. Their presentation began with a low, ominous hum playing in the background, the kind of music used in thriller films. A few students leaned forward as the screen lit up with a video. A forest trail lined with mossy trees, filtered light streaming in from above. Then the creature appeared. Small, 4-legged, furry. It had a plump body, a twitching tail, soft gray-brown fur. It stepped forward hesitantly, sniffing the air. "Watch this," one of the Barry students said dramatically. A hand entered the frame, holding what looked like a strip of cloth. The creature's ears perked up. It stared for a second, then let out a high-pitched hiss and swiped at the cloth, exposing a flash of tiny curved claws. Gasps rippled through the room. The presenter paused the video. "Do you see that?" he said, pointing at the still image. "Those claws weren't visible a second ago. They retract into the paws, like hidden blades." He glanced around, visibly proud. If that had been someone's arm, the creature would have shredded it to the bone. The class murmured in awe. There was even a bit of applause. The 3 Barry students bowed slightly before returning to their seats, heads high. Julie, meanwhile, sat with a faint furrow in her brow. She wasn't trying to be rude, she was honestly confused. That thing, that was supposed to be terrifying. Instructor Sabal must have noticed her expression. He cleared his throat. "Julie, you look like you have a question." She blinked and hesitated. Was that just a cat?" Snickers broke out across the room. A few students turned to look at her. Others whispered under their breath. Sabal raised a hand for silence. "Class," he said firmly. Then he looked at her with a curious expression, almost like he was amused. "No, Julie, that animal is a wild predator. It wouldn't be kept as a pet on Barry. Not if you valued your limbs." She nodded slowly, still puzzled. Back home, she had 4 cats. One of them, Whiskers, regularly knocked glasses off the kitchen counter for fun. That creature on the screen looked like Whiskers' less agitated cousin. She kept her mouth shut for the rest of the presentation. The second group was more dramatic. 2 tall students from a high-gravity world called Round stepped to the front, serious expressions on their faces. "Predators are dangerous," one began, "but nothing on our planet compares to the horrors that come from above." Julie perked up slightly. That sounded promising. The video started with eerie music and a trembling camera angle. Shadows danced across stone canyons, and a narrator spoke in hushed tones. They descend without warning. No one is safe, not even indoors. The footage cut to a wide, dusty plain. A colorful blur shot across the sky. "There," the other student said, pointing. "Slow it down." The video froze, then replayed in slow motion. A small, bird-like creature swooping down and grabbing something from the ground. It flapped once, then flew off, wings shining in the sunlight. "Now," the student said, "observe the beak." The screen zoomed in on the creature's short, curved beak. The video showed it gripping a hard seed, crunching through it with a loud crack. A dramatic sting of music played as the shell split open. "Those beaks are strong enough to snap bone," the presenter said gravely. Imagine if that were your finger. Another wave of gasps rolled through the class. Julie stared at the screen in disbelief. The Sky Terror looked almost exactly like a parakeet, maybe a little bulkier, but unmistakably bird-like. She could practically hear the chirping from the pet shop down the street from her old house. Before she could stop herself, her hand lifted slightly. "I'm sorry," she said, trying to keep her voice polite. "But that kind of looks like a parakeet." The class fell into immediate silence. Someone in the front whispered, "She's doing it again." Julie felt her ears burn. She hadn't meant to offend anyone. It was just if that's what passed for horror on other planets. Then, Instructor Sabal gave her a pointed look. "Julie, please, let the presenter speak." "I wasn't," she started, then closed her mouth. "It wasn't worth it." But someone else spoke up. "She's just jealous," a student muttered. "She doesn't take anything seriously." Julie stared down at her datapad, pretending not to hear. Sabal's eyes scanned the room, and for a moment, Julie thought he might say something to defend her. But instead, he just sighed. "Let's move on. Julie, you're next." She didn't move. A few students turned around in their seats, waiting. Julie cleared her throat. "Instructor, I think I may have misunderstood the assignment." Sabal tilted his head. "Misunderstood how?" "I thought we were supposed to talk about, like, actual dangers, not pets." Laughter rippled through the classroom. Sabal held up a hand again, but there was an unmistakable twitch at the corner of his mouth, half frown, half reluctant smile. "That pet," he said, "could rip your skin open. That's not something to dismiss lightly." Julie lowered her voice. "My cousin has one. He named it Pickles." A pause. Then, unexpectedly, the student next to her stood up. He was a small insectoid being from Zar. Barely 3 feet tall, but loud when he wanted to be. "She said her 4-year-old cousin has a stupid parakeet named Pickles," he announced helpfully. Sabal's expression hardened. "Julie, present now or receive a 0. Your choice." The laughter died down. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Julie knew what this meant. She wasn't just walking to the front of the class, she was walking a tightrope. If the parakeet comment hadn't doomed her socially, the next 10 minutes certainly would. But whatever. They wanted scary. She'd show them scary. Julie stood in front of the class with her datapad clutched tightly in both hands, her knuckles pale and tense. The screen behind her was still black, the projector waiting. The room was silent now, not just quiet, but the kind of silence that made your skin itch. The kind that meant everyone was holding their breath. Instructor Sabal had returned to his seat, watching her carefully, one hand resting near the console to control the video feed. He looked less like a teacher now and more like a judge. Julie swallowed hard and exhaled through her nose. She could feel the weight of every gaze on her. None of them were kind. Some looked curious, others skeptical. A few were still smirking from the parakeet comment. If they thought they were afraid before, she thought. Wait until they see this. She tapped her pad. The lights dimmed. The screen flared to life. My home planet is called Earth, she began, her voice low but steady. It's located in the Orion arm of the Milky Way galaxy, third planet from a yellow star. 71% of it is covered in liquid water. Our atmosphere contains breathable oxygen, and we have a magnetic field that protects us from solar radiation. On screen, the image of Earth rotated slowly blue oceans, white clouds, brown and green continents, swirling in a vast cosmic void. But those are the good parts, she said. I was told to focus on the dangerous ones. The earth faded to black. The next scene appeared a snowy landscape, empty and quiet. "This is part of North America," she said. "In the winter." A dark shape burst upward through the snow, snarling and fast, spraying white powder in every direction. The creature was short and muscular, with thick fur, tiny eyes, and enormous teeth bared in a furious snarl. "This is a wolverine," she said. "They weigh less than 20 kilograms, but they're aggressive enough to fight wolves and stubborn enough to attack bears." Gasps came from around the room. She paused the video and the snarling face froze on screen. Blood from some unseen prey stained the creature's mouth. "What is that?" someone asked quietly. "A predator," Julie said. "One of many." She tapped again. The next video clip rolled. A massive grizzly bear lumbered into view, sniffing the air. It looked like a walking mountain, shoulders like steel, paws the size of plates, thick muscle rippling beneath brown fur. The wolverine charged at it. The class screamed. Julie didn't flinch. "They fight like they don't understand fear," she said. "Or maybe they just don't care." Sable's eyes were locked on the screen. His mouth was a tight line. "But that's only the land," she continued. "Earth is covered in water. Lots of it, and not all of it is safe." The video changed again. Calm, crystal clear blue water shimmered on the screen. Fish darted through coral. Sea turtles glided past the camera. Everything looked peaceful. "We have over 230,000 documented marine species," Julie said. "Many are beautiful, harmless, or even helpful." A group of seals played in the surf, diving and leaping. "But then there are these." The screen shifted abruptly. From below, the camera showed a massive shape approaching, fast, too fast. A great white shark burst into view. Jaws wide, eyes black and soulless. It snapped down on one of the seals with brutal force. Someone screamed. Someone else yelled, "Stop it." Julie kept going. "They can smell blood from kilometers away," she said. "They can sense movement with electroreception. You might not even know it's coming until..." She cut the video just before the second bite. Sable sat frozen in his chair, one hand clenched around the console edge. Julie took a slow breath. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't trying to scare them for fun. She was just telling the truth. "Earth has over 1,000 species of venomous spiders," she said. "Hundreds of venomous snakes. We have scorpions, jellyfish that kill in minutes, and frogs whose skin secretes poison strong enough to stop a human heart." Now the screen flashed images quickly: an angry cobra, a black widow spider, a lion stalking through tall grass, a crocodile launching out of the water with its jaws open wide. We have lions, tigers, bears, wolves, leopards, jaguars, hyenas, Komodo dragons, and wild boars. We have insects that burrow into your skin and lay eggs. We have parasites that eat you from the inside out. The silence was absolute now. Sable looked pale. Julie didn't stop. "We have tornadoes that tear houses apart, earthquakes that split cities in half, volcanoes that can block out the sun, storms that drop frozen water from the sky hard enough to shatter bone." On screen, footage showed cars being tossed by hurricane wind, trees bending until they snapped, lava pouring down a hillside. A student near the front was visibly shaking. Another had buried their face in their hands. But Julie wasn't done. "Even our rain can freeze in the air before hitting the ground," she said. "That's called snow. Where I'm from, we get it for months every year." A clip showed kids bundled in coats, throwing snowballs. A student in the back whispered, "Your planet's rain freezes in midair." Julie nodded. Yeah, there was a kind of reverent horror in the silence. She took a breath, then moved to the final slide. But all of that's just nature. That's just the world. The screen changed again. Images of war, explosions, burning cities, troops marching, drones flying over neighborhoods, protesters clashing with riot police, a mushroom cloud blooming silently over a desert. The most dangerous thing on Earth isn't the animals. It's not the storms. It's not the diseases. It's us. The slide faded to black. For better or worse, humans adapt. We survive. We learn how to beat anything that threatens us. And when there's nothing left to fight, she looks straight at the class now. We turn on each other. No one spoke. Instructor Sabal was sitting with his mouth slightly open, as if trying to find words and failing. Julie tapped the pad again, powering down the screen. Just tired. She walked slowly back to her seat. No one made eye contact. They leaned away as she passed. A few students actually recoiled, clutching their desks like life rafts. She sat down, folded her hands on her lap, and stared straight ahead. The rest of the class passed in a blur. No one commented. No one volunteered feedback. The next student stood at the front and tried to present, but their voice trembled the entire time. Even the image of a lava eel from Vraz, which usually earned gasps, drew barely a flicker of attention. Julie didn't notice. She just stared at the floor. Lunch came and went. She sat in her usual corner, barely touching her sandwich. Her appetite was gone. She had told them the truth. Shown them what Earth really was, and it hadn't brought understanding. It had brought fear, more fear than before. She could feel the isolation wrapping around her like a second skin. She had expected, but that didn't make it hurt less. Then soft footsteps. She looked up, startled. Dojid stood there, his seal-like face curious and a little odd. "You are awesome," he said. Julie blinked. "What?" "The shark," he said, eyes wide. "Have you actually seen one?" A stunned pause. Then Julie nodded slowly. "Yeah, my uncle and I caught one while fishing once. It wasn't that big, though." Dojid sat down beside her without asking. Another shadow fell over the table. Then another. "Can you tell me more about those vampire bats?" Shulman asked. Julie looked up. Students surrounded her now, timid but fascinated. "Do you really have animals that melt skin? Is it true you have insects that drink blood? Have you ever seen a tornado?" She blinked again. Her heart lifted cautiously. They were scared, sure, but now they were curious. She smiled, for real this time. "Want to see a video of one?" Julie sat alone at her usual lunch spot, her tray barely touched. The sandwich she had packed that morning was still wrapped, resting on her lap like a forgotten thought. Her back was leaned against the cold, polished wall of the student common area, tucked away in the farthest corner where the overhead lights buzzed faintly and no one ever really sat. It wasn't assigned or labeled, just a corner that no one claimed, except her. Every day for 3 weeks, this had been her place. She'd gotten used to the shadows here, the half-silence, the absence of footsteps coming close. And after the presentation she'd given that morning, she was convinced this corner would be hers forever. She hadn't meant to scare them. Not really. But she also hadn't pulled any punches. Instructor Sabal said to present the dangers of her home planet, and she had. She showed them the predators, the natural disasters, the poisons, the viruses. And in the end, she told them the truth. That the most dangerous thing on Earth wasn't the environment, or the animals, it was the people. And the room had gone dead quiet. No clapping, no comments, just wide eyes and stiff backs. Even Sable had looked shaken. She'd walked back to her seat under a silence that felt like ice in her veins. The rest of the presentations blurred into background noise after that. She hadn't even registered the bell when lunch started. She just gathered her things and wandered here like always. She pulled her knees in and rested her chin on them, eyes unfocused, mind blank. Maybe she'd overdone it. Maybe she should have left out the shark footage or the war clips. Maybe she should have lied, picked one safe danger like a bee sting and talked about that instead. Would that have helped? Probably not. She sighed and stared at her untouched food. Then, a shadow fell over her. Julie looked up quickly, startled. She half expected it to be Sable, ready to give her some lecture about tone or boundaries. But it wasn't Sable. It was Doje. The seal-like student stood with his lunch tray in his hands, and an odd expression on his face, part admiration, part disbelief. His wide eyes blinked once, twice. Julie didn't say anything. Neither did he. Then he spoke. "You are awesome," Julie blinked. "Huh?" "The shark," he said, grinning now. The size of it. The way it moved. That was... Have you really seen one before? She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yeah, my uncle and I caught one once while fishing. Not as big as the one in the video, though. Doja's eyes went even wider. You caught it. She gave a little shrug. Well, we let it go after. But yeah, without asking, he sat down across from her and unwrapped his own food. Julie stared at him. Then, a no shadow. She turned her head and saw a tall insectoid student hovering nearby, holding his tray awkwardly. "Can you tell me more about those vampire bat things?" he asked, voice soft but curious. "Do they really drink blood?" Julie opened her mouth, not sure what to say, but before she could answer, yet another shadow fell across the table, and another, and another. Within moments, a group had gathered around her, some sitting, others standing close by, eyes wide with questions. Do bears actually eat people? What's snow taste like? Have you ever seen a lion? What's a jellyfish? Is it true humans have weapons that can destroy cities? Julie didn't know where to start. She glanced around, overwhelmed, but not in the way she'd expected. They weren't afraid of her anymore. Well, maybe they still were, a little. But they were fascinated. They wanted to know. Julie sat up a little straighter and finally unwrapped her sandwich. Her appetite hadn't fully returned, but it was on its way back. "It's true," she said, "about the bats, but they're really small and they don't usually attack people unless they're desperate. We mostly see them in the tropics." That set off another wave of questions. As she talked, more students joined. Some listened quietly, others asked questions, and a few even took notes. The table that had always been hers and only hers was now surrounded by classmates from half a dozen worlds. A few even offered her food in return. Slices of spiced root from Garrick's homeworld, a small glowing cube of nutrient gel from Aether, a wafer that smelled like cinnamon, but tasted like mint. Doja leaned forward, elbows on the table. "So, if Earth is that dangerous, how did your species survive? Like, how did you make it to space?" Julie thought about that for a second. She could have gone with the scientific answer, something about evolution, adaptability, technology. Instead, she said, "We didn't really have a choice. Everything wanted to kill us, so we had to get smarter. We had to build, learn, try again. And when we messed up, we just kept going." Doja sat back, visibly impressed. Another student chimed in. I thought humans were supposed to be scary. But you're kind of cool." Julie laughed softly. "Well, we can be both." Across the room, Instructor Sabal stood by the observation window, a warm drink in his hand and a quiet smile on his face. He hadn't followed Julie after class. He'd debated it. Part of him wanted to reassure her. Maybe explain that her presentation had done exactly what it was supposed to do. But something told him she didn't need that from him. She needed it from them. And now, seeing the crowd around her, seeing the laughter, the questions, the way even the shyest students leaned in to hear her speak, he knew he'd made the right call. It hadn't gone perfectly, but it had worked. He turned back toward his desk, preparing for the next round of grading. Before he sat down, he tapped his data pad and pulled up Julie's assignment one more time. There was a part he hadn't been able to finish the first time around, the part after the shark, right before the clip about venomous insects. He clicked play but barely got 3 seconds in before pausing and muttering, "No. Still too much." Then he chuckled under his breath. If she survived that planet, he murmured, shaking his head, she deserves an A. It started with 1 student sitting at her table. Then 3. By the end of the week, Julie had to scoot over just to make room for all the lunch trays. What used to be the loneliest spot in the common area, the dim corner near the flickering light panel, and the ever-humming recycler vent, was now one of the busiest. Students from all across the galaxy came to sit near her. Sometimes they didn't even ask questions. They just wanted to be close, like the atmosphere around her carried some kind of thrill. Julie didn't quite know how to handle it. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. Back on Earth, she'd always been a little offbeat, smart, sure, but quiet. The kind of kid who read the warning labels on amusement park rides and watched documentaries for fun. She'd never had crowds following her around. But here, at the Intergalactic Academy, she had become something else entirely. A mystery, a legend, a walking embodiment of everything the other students thought they knew about humans, and everything they'd just found out was true. By the second week after her presentation, her nickname had caught on. Not Julie, not the human girl. Now they called her Deathworlder. At first, she thought it was a joke, some kind of sarcastic label meant to remind everyone she was still different. But the way they said it didn't feel like mockery. It felt like awe. "Deathworlder, can you look at this bite mark? Do you think it's venomous? Deathworlder, did you really fight off a bear with a stick?" That one made her laugh. "No," she'd said. "I ran. Very fast. That's the human solution to most bear problems." They laughed too. Even the students who'd once stiffened when she walked by now greeted her in the halls. Some asked her to tell more stories. Others begged for Earth survival tips just in case they ever visited. "I wouldn't recommend it," she joked more than once. "But if you do, don't pet anything that has fur, feathers, or more than 2 legs." Instructor Sabal watched the change unfold from a cautious distance. He didn't interfere. He didn't need to. Julie had done what no policy, no mandatory diversity session, and no teacher's lecture could have achieved. She had flipped the narrative. Fear had turned to fascination. Isolation had become inclusion. And yet, Sabal knew better than to believe the job was done. Curiosity was good, but it wasn't the same as understanding. Respect was earned, but trust had to be built slowly. Some of the admiration Julie was getting now rode too close to myth, too close to fear wearing a different mask. He saw how students leaned in when she talked about venomous snakes or frozen rain, but zoned out when she tried to explain history, or science, or literature from her planet. The moment she stopped being scary cool, they lost interest. That worried him. He wanted them to admire her for more than just surviving a dangerous world. He wanted them to see her as a person, not a novelty. Still, it was a start. And it was more than he could have hoped for. Just a few weeks ago, Julie noticed it too. At first, the attention had felt like a miracle. She wasn't alone anymore. People talked to her without flinching. She didn't dread lunchtime. She didn't shrink when her name was called. But over time, she started to see the patterns. They didn't ask about her family, or what Earth was like beyond the predators and disasters. No one asked about her favorite music or what it felt like to ride a bike down a sunlit hill in early spring. No one asked about her old dog, or what it was like to grow up watching the stars from a bedroom window, wondering what other kids might be doing on those points of light. Instead, they wanted to know if she'd ever killed a snake with her bare hands. No. If she'd ever wrestled a crocodile, absolutely not. If she'd seen a volcano erupt in person. Kind of. It was on TV, but it was live footage. She played along at first. Partly because it was easier and partly because she liked being liked. But slowly, the novelty began to wear thin. She started changing the subject. Sometimes, when someone asked her about spiders, she'd pivot to talk about Earth's space program or the Voyager probes. When a student wanted to hear another terrifying jungle story, she'd show them a clip of children in Uganda dancing in the rain, or a video of a human choir singing harmonies that made even the Aether twins go quiet. She didn't want to be just Deathworlder. She wanted to be Julie again. The breakthrough came on a Thursday during open discussion hour. Instructor Sabal had given the class free time to prepare for their upcoming interspecies exchange week, an event where they'd collaborate with students from neighboring systems via HoloLink. Julie sat with a small group near the center of the room. Doje was there. Of course, he always was now, and so were a few others who had become regulars at her table. They were planning presentation topics when one of the students, a bright green-scaled girl from Ovnex, looked at Julie and asked, "If Earth is so dangerous, why would your people even live there?" Julie tilted her head, blinking. It was the first time someone had asked her why. Not how she survived, or what was dangerous, but why stay. She took a moment before answering. "Because it's home," she said simply. There was silence for a second. Then she added, "Yeah, it's dangerous. It's unpredictable. But it's also beautiful. You can't imagine the colors of the leaves in autumn, or the way sunlight filters through a snowy forest. We have songs that can make you cry, foods that taste like nothing else in the galaxy. We have history and struggle and joy. And we learn to live with the danger, not because we're reckless, but because it's worth it." Doji looked at her quietly. "You miss it," Julie smiled softly. Every day, that moment changed something. The students didn't respond with another round of sharp questions. They asked about Earth languages, about books, about cities and culture. They wanted to know what kids did for fun, what school was like, what it meant to celebrate a holiday. And Julie talked. She told them. And for the first time, they really listened. A week later, during morning assembly, Instructor Sabal pulled up Julie's presentation again, not to grade, but to showcase. He played a short clip during the school's cultural spotlight program, the section with the snow and the wolverine paired with her voice explaining frozen rain. This time, there was no fear in the room, just fascination and respect. After the clip ended, Sable addressed the students. "We often judge a world or a person by the most extreme parts. But that's not the whole picture. Julie's presentation taught us something about danger. But she's also teaching us something about strength, resilience, and perspective." He looked out over the rows of students and smiled. Sometimes, the most dangerous places create the most extraordinary people. From then on, the title Deathworlder changed meaning again. It no longer meant dangerous creature. Now it meant survivor, explorer, bridge builder. And Julie wore it with pride. But she also made sure everyone knew her name. Because behind the myths and monsters, behind the stories of sharks and snakes, there was still a girl from a blue planet spinning in a quiet corner of the galaxy. And her name was Julie.